All right, let's jump right in with this deep dive, shall we? Into the mind of Vladimir Putin. We're going to be looking at an interview he did recently where he gets really candid, I mean, really candid about global tensions and, Russia's position and where he sees it going from here.
It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm really excited to talk about this. I feel like we get so caught up in you know, the headlines and the quick takes that we don't often get a chance to really dig into what's motivating the major players on the world stage.
Exactly. And this interview, I think it offers a really unique window into Putin's thinking.
Totally. Okay, so let's get right to it. Right off the bat, he doesn't shy away from the big, elephant in the room, World War III.
hmm
What does he have to say about all this talk of a third world war?
Well, he kind of dismisses the idea, of it being right around the corner.
Okay.
Calls it alarmist rhetoric, but, and this is a big but, he delivers this stark warning.
Oh, a warning.
Yeah.
Okay. To who?
Well, to anyone basically that he thinks is escalating the situation.
Got it.
Anyone that's making things worse.
Yeah. Okay, so what kind of warning are we talking about here?
He actually says, and this is a quote, "Let them have a bad life. Let them continue to escalate. We will always respond to any challenge. Always."
Whoa, strong words.
Yeah. Pulls no punches there, does he?
Not at all. It's like he's drawing a line in the sand.
He is. He absolutely is.
Yeah.
And he keeps going. Goes on to criticize the Biden administration's, aid to Ukraine.
Right.
Saying it's all about personal motives, rather than actually thinking strategically about what's best.
Wow. So he really thinks the U.S. is making a mistake.
Big time. He really believes that.
Huh. So we've got, Putin being very blunt, very, assertive in his position.
Yeah.
But it's not all doom and gloom, is it? What else jumps out at you from this interview?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. He does shift gears. To really get what he's saying, though, you have to look at how he brings up history.
Yeah.
Especially Russia's experience in the Crimean War in the 19th century.
The Crimean War. Okay, I vaguely remember that from history class, but remind me why this is relevant.
Sure. So basically, Putin's drawing these parallels between the restrictions, the pressure, that Russia had to deal with from the West back then, and what's going on today. The sanctions, the criticism.
Okay.
His point is that Russia was able to rebuild, even with all that going on.
Interesting. So he's basically saying, hey, we've been through tough times before. We always come out stronger on the other side.
Exactly. That's the narrative he's building.
Okay, I'm following. Does he give any specific examples of how Russia, overcame those challenges back in the day?
He does. He actually quotes historians who called the Crimean War, get this, the First World War.
Huh.
He's pointing out how conflict just keeps repeating itself,
Yeah.
Like it's this cycle. And he says, gradually, as Russia concentrated, it regained all its rights in the Black Sea and strengthened itself.
Powerful stuff. So he's using this to show that Russia can handle pressure, They'll bounce back.
Precisely.
Okay. But here's the thing, is that the only way to look at the Crimean War, is Putin's take on it, the universally accepted view.
Right, that's a good point.
Mhm.
Remember, history is often told from the winner's perspective, right?
Yeah.
So his version might emphasize certain aspects that, support his current stance.
That's something for our listener to keep in mind. Don't just take one side of the story as the absolute truth. There are many ways to look at it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about global tensions, historical parallels. What else is he really hammering home in this interview?
Well, on top of all that talk about, grit and determination, he also wants to showcase how technologically advanced Russia is. He's really proud of this new Resnik missile system they've developed.
Ugh, the Resnik.
Yeah.
That's been in the news a lot lately. He calls it a historical event in space rocket technology, right?
He does. And he calls it the first of its kind, a real game changer. You can just tell how proud he is when he talks about it.
Yeah.
He wants the world to see Russia as a force to be reckoned with.
Okay, so break it down, Kami. What exactly is this Resnik missile system? What makes it so special, and how does it fit into their overall military strategy?
Well, it's a hypersonic glide vehicle, launched from a modified intercontinental ballistic missile.
Okay.
What makes it so tough to deal with is its speed and maneuverability. It's really hard to intercept, which, makes it pretty potent.
I can see why he's proud of it, but is there more to it than just having a new fancy weapon?
There is. It actually reveals how much Putin's personally involved in pushing for these kinds of technological leaps forward.
Really?
Yeah, he even mentions like overruling people in the Ministry of Defense to make sure this project, went ahead.
Wow. So it's not just about having a new weapon, it's about sending a message.
Exactly. It's about showing the world that sanctions or no sanctions, Russia can still innovate.
So he's basically using the Oreznik as this symbol
Yeah.
of their resilience, of their ability to compete.
Right, and it's not just a message for the West either, it's also for the Russian people, reminding them that there's still a major player on the world stage.
You're right. He is really connecting all these dots. It's not just about military strength or even technology. It's about projecting this image of a strong, independent Russia
Absolutely.
that can chart its own course.
He wants to control the narrative. He wants to present a specific vision of how he sees Russia fitting into, the grand scheme of things.
I think that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
Mhm.
We're getting this rare glimpse into how Putin thinks, what makes him tick, how he sees Russia's role in the world.
It's complex for sure,
Yeah.
but getting his perspective is key if you want to make sense of the choices Russia's making,
Yeah.
and what that means for everybody.
Definitely agree. There's still a lot more to unpack, though. When we come back, we'll dive deeper into Putin's vision for Russia's future and what it means for the global balance of power. Don't go anywhere.
Before the break, we were talking about Putin using the Crimean War to make his point about Russia's resilience. It really made me think about how he connects the past, the present, and the future in this interview.
It's a powerful rhetorical strategy.
It is. It's like he's saying this tension with the West. This isn't anything new. Russia's been there before, misunderstood, pressured.
Isolated.
Exactly. And he's saying they always figure out a way to rise above it.
It's a message that really resonates with his base, the Russian people.
Yeah, for sure. Like a rallying cry almost.
Mhm.
But, speaking of the future, what does he actually see for Russia? I mean, does he lay out any specific plans or goals?
He doesn't give us a detailed roadmap, but he definitely paints a picture.
Okay.
The main takeaway is that Russia is going to decide its own destiny.
Independent of the West. Exactly. He's emphasizing that they will not be dictated to. They will forge their own path based on their own interests, not anyone else's.
Sovereignty is a big deal to him, clearly. But, he's not all talk, is he? He points to concrete examples like we talked about, the Oreznik missile system, as proof that they're taking action.
It's like he's saying, look, we're not just talking the talk, we're walking the walk. We're innovating, we're defending ourselves.
Right. Okay, and maybe this is naive, but isn't focusing so much on military might kind of a risky strategy? Could it backfire? Like, what about the economy?
I mean, it's a valid question. There's definitely a risk that emphasizing military strength could come at a cost, right? Maybe they'll fall behind in other areas.
Right, like economically, socially. So Putin's vision is not without its, downsides or its critics, even within Russia, I imagine.
Of course not. No leader's vision is.
Right, it's important to remember that. Okay, but let's zoom out for a sec. It seems like he's not content with just playing defense. There's the sense that he sees a bigger role for Russia on the world stage. Am I reading too much into that?
No, I don't think so. Putin sees the current global landscape as being in flux, right? He thinks Western influence is declining.
Okay.
And that creates an opening for Russia, to step up, form new alliances, and maybe even reshape the whole international order. He's talked about a multipolar world before, and this interview really doubles down on that concept.
Now, this multipolar world idea, can you unpack that a bit? Like, what would that actually look like?
Sure. So in a multipolar world, you wouldn't have just one dominant superpower like we've seen with the West for the past few decades.
Right.
Instead, you'd have several major power centers.
More balance.
Exactly. Think of it as a more balanced distribution of power globally.
Okay, so in Putin's view, Russia would be one of those power centers.
Right, and he's working towards that goal. He's connecting with countries that are also wary of Western dominance, building economic and military partnerships. He wants to position Russia as the leader of this new bloc.
I see. So all these pieces are starting to fit together, but how might this grand vision play out in the real world? What could it actually mean for people on the ground?
Well, for one, we'll likely see Russia being more assertive on the world stage. This could mean increased military deployments, stronger ties with countries like China and Iran, or even challenging the U.S. dollar's dominance in global finance.
So a real shift in the balance of power. That's a lot to consider. But what does this mean for global stability? I mean, is this a good thing, a bad thing?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. A multipolar world could bring more stability because power is spread out, no one country calling all the shots.
Okay.
On the other hand, it could also make things riskier, miscalculations, conflicts as different powers compete for influence.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like we're heading into uncharted territory with both the potential for conflict and cooperation. So, with all these shifting dynamics, how can our listeners, make sense of it all?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed, to think critically. We need to understand the different perspectives out there to really evaluate all the information that's coming at us from all sides.
So, don't just take things at face value, whether it's from the news or politicians.
Exactly. Dig deeper, understand the motivations, the goals of the key players, and then form your own conclusions based on, a balanced view of the facts.
Deep dives like this one are a good place to start.
I think so. It's about giving people the tools to think for themselves and have constructive conversations about the future.
Right.
Exactly. Okay, but before we go too far down that road, let's focus back in on Putin's vision. We've talked a lot about his military ambitions, but what about his economic strategies? I mean, does he have a plan for making Russia a leading economic power too? We were just talking about this multipolar world idea and Russia fitting into that. It's super interesting. But I want to shift gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about the military side of things, but what about the economy? Does Putin lay out, like an economic plan in this interview?
Yeah.
How does he see Russia becoming like an economic powerhouse too?
Oh, yeah. He definitely touches on some key economic strategies that are really important for understanding his vision.
Okay, so let's dig into that. What are some of the big things he's emphasizing on the economic front?
Well, one of the biggest is, energy. He sees Russia's, massive oil and gas reserves as a major advantage on the world stage.
Right.
And he's been working to, diversify their energy export markets, looking more towards Asia and reducing their reliance on Europe. Yeah, that makes sense, especially with everything going on between Russia and Europe right now. But is that enough? I mean, just selling oil and gas to become, a truly powerful economy.
That's where his push for technological innovation comes in.
Okay.
He doesn't want Russia to be stuck just selling raw materials.
Yeah.
He wants them to move up the value chain, developing advanced technologies, producing high-tech stuff.
Interesting. So it's about more than just energy. He wants a more diverse and what's the word? A more sophisticated economy.
Exactly.
Does he give any examples of how he plans to do that?
He talks about investing in things like artificial intelligence,
Mm.
robotics, biotechnology. These are all areas that he sees as drivers of future economic growth, and he wants Russia to be, at the forefront.
It sounds like he's really thinking long term, trying to set Russia up for success in a world that's changing so fast, technologically speaking.
Yeah.
But hold on, what about the elephant in the room, the sanctions? How can he achieve all of this with all those sanctions in place?
Well, that's the thing. He actually presents the sanctions as an opportunity.
Really?
Yeah, he says it's forced Russia to become more self-reliant,
Interesting.
to develop their own internal markets, their own technologies, and to build stronger ties with countries that aren't, part of that Western economic system.
So he's saying the sanctions have actually backfired, making Russia stronger in the long run.
That's his argument. It's definitely a bold claim, but you can't deny the impact those sanctions have had.
Okay, so it's a bit of a mixed bag, right?
For sure.
Some sectors of the Russian economy are hurting, others are innovating. I guess it's too early to tell if his gamble is going to pay off.
Yeah, but it's a really interesting case study, this whole idea of resilience, of adapting to these huge challenges.
So, big picture here, what does all of this mean for, the average person? Putin's perspective on global tension, his vision for Russia, his focus on military and, the economy. What's the takeaway?
Well, I think if you want to understand how Russia's going to act on the world stage moving forward, you got to understand how Putin thinks, right?
Yeah.
He sees Russia as this, major power, destined to be a leader in shaping the future.
So it's about more than just securing their borders or regional influence. This is about something much bigger.
Absolutely. He wants to see a fundamental shift in the global balance of power.
Okay. So how do we wrap our heads around this?
Well, he's not afraid of confrontation, right? But he's also, pragmatic.
Okay.
He'll negotiate if it's in Russia's best interest. The key is that his actions are driven by this, complex mix of things: history, politics, economics.
It's never simple, is it?
It's rarely that straightforward.
Okay.
But if we want to make sense of what's going on in the world, We have to engage with that complexity.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
We need to move beyond just the easy narratives and really dig into the nuances of these big global issues.
Yeah.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given us a lot to think about. We've gotten this, glimpse into how Putin thinks, what drives him, how he sees Russia fitting into the world.
And it's crucial to remember this is just one perspective.
Right.
To really understand how complicated all of this is, we need to hear other voices too.
Mm.
People in Ukraine, other countries in that region,
Mm.
experts all over the world.
The more perspectives, the better.
Definitely.
And that's what it's all about, right? Not being passive, but really engaging in these big conversations about the future.
Absolutely. Which brings up a final question for our listeners to think about. Let's say Putin's vision of this multipolar world with Russia as a major player does come true. What will that mean for the balance of power globally? Will it make things more stable, more cooperative, or will it lead to more conflict, more competition?
That is the question. I don't know if there are any easy answers, but I do know that exploring these big questions, hearing different perspectives, and thinking critically are crucial for navigating all this.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the mind of Vladimir Putin. I hope it's given you a new perspective on global affairs. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep asking those tough questions.